This episode is brought to you by our Patreon supporters. Become a patron today at patreon.com/into the portal.
Hello, and welcome back into the portal. I'm Amber Ray.
And I'm Andrew McKay. And welcome back to another Film Friday episode.
Yeah.
And we've come back full circle to the Wailing, which we were going to do last week and never ended up doing. So shout out to Adam Castaneda.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for suggesting this film. It's our first foreign film.
It is.
For our Film Fridays.
I guess so, hey?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, first foreign language film, right? Like subtitled
exactly.
film. And right off the bat, I just want to say, for anybody that would have maybe some reservations about watching a subtitled film, this one is really easy to watch subtitled. Mm-hmm. It's not one of those like really rapid fire lines ones where you have to be staring at it like really keep, it's easy to follow with the subtitles.
Exactly. And the Korean language is so fun to listen to.
It really is. Yeah.
So when you do happen to step away for a second and you hear them talking, you don't know what they're saying. It's quite interesting.
There's a lot of emotion in the way that the inflection of like all Asian languages, but yeah, Korean we noticed in the movie for sure. Yeah. So yeah, like this was a bit of a mind bender, kind of. In a way.
I feel like we say that every week.
Actually, I think I just started saying that with The Void because that one truly was. But this movie kind of takes you down some different pathways over the 2.5 hours roughly of time.
Exactly.
And it's pretty epic. Yeah.
It is, yeah. So The Wailing, yeah, it's very recent. Translated from English, it's originally called Goksung, directed by none other than Nan Hong-jin. I'm totally butchering that. I'm sorry. Okay. Na Hong-jin. I don't even know. But anyways.
It's all good.
It's great. It's great. And he did a really good job with this one, we think. Even though it was really highly acclaimed and overall got like almost 100% approval rating from critics and I think a 99% approval rating from audiences. Okay. But even despite that, there were some mixed reviews online when I happened to glance through after we watched the film.
Mm-hmm. It's always interesting to see.
But I honestly think this was a bit of a masterpiece. And you're right, though, Andrew. Like, it takes you down some unusual avenues. Mm-hmm. And you don't even know. Because it's like it's a blended genre film. Like, you get black comedy. You get, obviously, suspense, thriller, / horror. Obviously, violence is a major theme. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, I really enjoyed this movie. And I really, really enjoyed the opening sequence. It was one of my like, top opening sequences I've seen thus far this year. Okay. I thought it was really effective. You get that opening quote immediately, which is actually a verse from the Bible, from the book of Luke. And basically he quotes saying, this is it here. "Why are you troubled?" Jesus asked. "And why do doubts arise in your hearts? Look at my hands and my feet. It is I, myself. Touch me and see, for a spirit does not have flesh and bones, as you see I have." End quote.
Right.
So that is essentially from right after Jesus was resurrected. Mm-hmm. And so he went back to his most, his closest disciples and revealed himself to them. And obviously there were some doubts. Yeah. So I thought that was really interesting that you get that. We do get subtle nuances throughout the entire movie revolving around this like sort of grading up against like organized religion and Catholicism. Hey,
yeah, there's some very strange kind of juxtapositions that we see throughout the film. So, but just to give it a breakdown here because we expect that you guys have watched it.
Exactly. Yeah.
But did you want me to run through? Do you want to run through like?
Definitely. Yeah. I had one other point too to make just on that opening sequence too, because you do get that quote right away, and then it sort of melts into this very austere, beautiful, calming landscape. It's like a seaside kind of a thing, and you see a man fishing from a distance. You get an up-close shot of him with a worm wriggling around his hands, and you get it on the hook, and then he casts the line.
Yeah.
And that is basically a metaphor for this entire movie.
Right.
And so I think that that's very important, and that's why I'm kind of putting in one of my top favorites of opening sequences of this year.
Definitely. Yeah, there's a lot of good foreshadowing built right into that. And it's just beautiful cinematography.
Yeah.
Like the wide angle shots, getting those really, those wide panning views of the landscape of the water. And we get that in all kinds of scene transitions throughout the film, which is awesome. But, okay, so like...
Yeah, let's give a rundown here.
So just quick rundown to center ourselves here. So the movie essentially follows the main character, which is a guy by the name of Zhangzhou, or Zhangzhou. Close enough. Yeah. Who is a police sergeant. Just, he's very well. He's like middle level. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's not the lowest on the rung, but he's not like he's not in charge. But he's a police officer, and he's hilarious. He's kind of he's definitely the black comedy aspect of this movie comes from him.
He's almost like the Pink Panther foil kind of thing.
Almost. He's just like kind of bumbling through his job. He shows up late for all the crime scenes at the beginning of the movie. Like
always the last one.
He's always the last one, and they're always just like, "Oh, you always have an excuse. Like first it's your mother-in-law, and like now it's your whatever." Like he's always.
You were taking a nap.
Yeah, I was taking a nap. So yeah, basically, I love the beginning. It starts off really drastically. There's the scene of him getting up early, and his wife's like, "Why are you up so early?" And he's just like, "Someone's been killed," and it goes straight into him. At the crime scene, and it's just, I don't know, it was a really good way to tee him up as the main character. And he's just such a normal guy, you know what I mean? Like, kind of chubby, just normal dude, has a wife and daughter, lives with his mother-in-law,
very average.
Just very average guy. Yeah.
That's a really good way to phrase him. And he has this sense about him of just this sort of, he's not very capable. And I think that that's like a theme that they explore a lot in this movie, right? Because you get this sense of bumblingness from him, but also from all of the crime scenes that you see from the very beginning. There's several, right, throughout the movie where we get these massacre-like situations, and they all come in and they're just pouring out of cars. There's a million of them all swarming around doing nothing, essentially. And then you get something happen, like at the second crime scene when the house burns down and the woman goes nuts. Literally no one's doing anything. And you even made the comment, right? You're like, all of those people would be dead if this was the United States right now.
Yeah, well, anywhere in anywhere else, really.
They'd be shot.
Like in Canada, too. Like, for sure. Like, you got some crazy, like, diseased person violently attacking you. The officers are gonna shoot them or tase them or something, right?
Instead, a lot of what you get is just this very comedic sequences of exactly that. Bumbling fools, essentially. Like, it could be a Charlie Chaplin movie, kind of. Like,
very much so.
It's so funny. No guns.
But at the same time, it's like, that I'm cool with that, too, a little bit.
Yeah.
Other than being attacked by, crazy, flailing, blood-covered, like, whatever. But that's interesting. Okay, so, like, in those first few scenes, that's the first pathway we're taking down in this movie. You're almost teed up to think that this is almost like a virus or like some sort of an infection, or whatever, maybe a curse or something like that. But clearly, it's I don't know. You think it's biological at the beginning.
You totally do, and you get that almost like not like foreshadowing, but you do at the very first crime scene when they uncover the cult den kind of thing, and it's in this like kind of ramshackle building, which was the actual scene of the crime. And then remember, there's a secondary crime scene where they actually find the body in the kitchen and stuff.
Right.
But essentially, he looks up. He's like having a smoke, taking a break because he's just seen a bunch of really effed up stuff.
Yeah.
And he looks up, and you see him look at like the wooden beam of the building, and there's like this weird plant, like mossy stuff growing on it. So you're thinking to yourself like, okay, there is a biological element to this. And then you get that in the rashes that appear on the victims, and the people that commit the crimes themselves and the massacres.
Right. So basically, people are just like breaking out in their skins breaking out in boils and weird rashes and stuff, and they basically just lose their minds and massacre their families. It's very much like The Rage in like 28 Days Later or something like that, right?
Yeah, actually, that really was reminiscent. Except you get more of like the possessed angle too.
Yeah.
So it's not as if their bodies have disintegrated and they're dead.
Right.
But they're physically not themselves anymore, and they've been possessed by something or a biological agent. You're kind of led to believe. There's a lot of ambiguity in this film.
There's a lot of ambiguity, but they definitely made it. They, at least in the very beginning, like leading you into the real like thick of it. It's believable. You know what I mean? Like they're looking at the first one. They're like the officers are talking to each other. Like, what do you think? Like crime of passion? Like, is that the only thing that makes sense? And they're trying to rationalize it in like not spectacular ways.
Exactly. The Occam's razor. What's the most mundane explanation? What can describe what's happening? Because this, like, what they walk in on, it's essentially this guy that's in sort of a comatose zombie-like state. His eyes are basically, like, whited over.
Pretty much.
His skin is, like, got this crazy, weird, disease-looking thing. And then they make this other sort of claim that he had, like, this dose of mushrooms in his system, in his blood. And that's why he did all this stuff. And then right away after that, there's the counter explanation, and that's when we get introduced to the Japanese man,
right?
The foreign man, as this other sort of like fairy tale, sort of folkloric rumors around the village that this foreigner, this stranger that's recently moved here, is somehow responsible for all of this.
Right. Because I guess there'd been multiple stories about him, right? Like, and the guys, so what was it again? He says, like, there was rumors about him being, like, a rapist.
Yes,
right?
There was the rumor that he had raped the woman who went insane at the second crime scene and her house burned down, and then she hung herself. So there's that narrative. There's also one that his friend, the cop sergeant, like Jong-ju, his friend that's not a cop, tells him, like, or no, it is his friend that's a cop, sorry. Because there's two people, right, that are his kind of go-tos. There's the guy that's the cop that's, like, on his similar rank as him.
Yep.
And then there's his friend that he talks to that is like, I don't even know if he's a restaurant owner or what he does.
It's like an herbalist shop.
An herbalist shop. Yeah, that definitely looked like that.
Yeah.
But so you get little tidbits from both of these characters. And I think it was the cop in the first scene that relates the story of some guy. I don't remember the exact details of the story, but something to do with how he came into contact with him and basically went insane. And then the person that came into contact with the other guy, like the second guy after, went insane too. And it's just kind of like a domino effect of people experiencing this.
Yeah. And the funniest thing about it too, which is kind of a black comedy aspect, is that he's never really asked, like, Jong-ju and his partner that start poking around after they're at these first two scenes, like, they're not asked to do this. Their task is not to investigate this. They're literally, like, meant to, like, guard the house that's burnt down, and just, like, they're just basically, like, beat cops. But then they end up taking, kind of out of character almost, like, how he's presented, like, takes some curiosity, like, into his own hands, you know what I mean?
Totally. I think as soon as he starts to realize that this is a lot closer to home for him, and it's a lot more, like, relevant to his life.
Right.
Like, especially once his friend starts saying that he's got these nightmares, and then he starts experiencing nightmares too. And then you get that really weird sort of ethereal scene where it starts off with him allegedly, like, guarding the house. It looks like it's, it's a daytime scene. And that's when we're introduced to the girl ghost, which is Moo Myung, I believe her name is. And she starts throwing rocks at him while he's just sitting there, right? And then that's when, so that's like a legitimate scene, or is presented as that at first, not a dream sequence at all. Yeah. But then what you get is this weird, he almost just gives up all authority, right? Because she dismisses the fact that there's police tape, enters the crime scene, and he just follows her. He doesn't even really, he does say one thing, but he doesn't really stop her.
Hey, don't go in there.
Yeah.
Hey.
With such authority, right?
Yeah.
Like, he's definitely lacking in that the entire movie. But then you get that awesome, like, transition where he gets a phone call from his partner, and basically they exchange whatever words, and he says he's got a witness, which is Moo Myung. And then he turns around, she's vanished at this point, and that's when you get him go through the building to the back, and he gets his first sighting of that devilish looking man beast creature with red eyes that's, like, sucking on the guts of a pig or something.
Yeah.
Just behind the building, casually, broad daylight.
I was really confused about that too.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe you can clarify this for me. It's like I kept going back and forth between asking myself, like, is that the Japanese guy, right?
It was very ambiguous, yeah.
Because it looked exactly like him.
It did,
but it was just like this random, like, demon thing eating a deer, which other people had seen before, right?
Yes.
And then,
but you get allusions to that later on, right? When the non-cop friend leads the two cops to the hill. They go up the hill. They see the carcasses laying all over, right?
Yeah.
And so it's obvious that he's been practicing his
whatever
animal
it is.
feasting on live guts or whatever. I don't even know.
So
it is the same guy.
There's there's the demonic symbolism is very prevalent obviously.
Super prevalent, which is weird, right? Because you don't get any authority from the Catholic Church.
No. So, I mean, because this is like kind of getting towards the midpoint of the film, and it gets really confusing. Like, it does get really confusing because you have this Japanese man who is rumored to be a ghost, but they're not sure if he is or isn't, what he is or what's going on there. Strange things are happening and people are going crazy. There's this other woman that Zhongzhu doesn't know is a ghost or is some sort of other spectral entity at this point. And what else is going on? What else is...
Well, you just get these continuing...
Oh, and then you've got this guy in the woods. Did I already say that?
Yeah,
like
there's the guy in the woods.
Yeah. So, and nothing's really connected, seemingly.
Not really. Yeah, not at first.
Right.
It's confusing. But you don't even... It isn't until the end of the movie that you realize that Mumyong is a ghost and that she is a lot less benevolent than you might have thought she was. But I kind of had my suspicions of her in that first scene where she's with Zhongzhu and shows him, like, she's the one that relates that there was a shaman present in that building doing a ritual at the request of the woman who ended up going crazy. And that she got the worst of it is what this Mumyong relates to him. And then then Zhongzhu asks her if she was present. And then that's when she replies, I saw it with my own eyes.
Right.
And then that's when he gets the phone call from his partner. And he's like, I have a witness. He's like stoked on it.
Yeah, and she vanishes.
And then she vanishes. And then it's not until much later in the film that we're reintroduced to her. But she does make those initial claims against the Japanese man. Paints him as a blood sucker. He's going to suck the blood out of you if he notices you, essentially.
Yeah, which of course is what this thing is doing to animals in the woods.
Exactly. So is that a legitimate warning? Or is that her...
It's definitely made to seem that way, right? Like,
are these like competing devilish entities?
That's what it seems like. It seems like there's two evil entities battling it out for who's going to be more badass or something.
Totally.
In this thing. I've something I noticed about that scene when she's throwing the rocks, and we don't know at this point that she's a ghost or whatever it is, right? Some sort of entity, metaphysical entity. That clearly she had already, like, there was a connection to Zhongzhu because she's throwing the rocks, right? As soon as his friend's gone is when they can actually, like, speak or make that connection. It was almost like he had to approach her first before she could do anything. And she's just this entity throwing rocks out, trying to, and again with the fishing, right? Kind of with that same metaphor.
Oh, that's a great extension of that metaphor, yeah.
And then as soon as his friend's gone and he's finally, like, she keeps throwing, that's such a funny scene, image too, right? Like, his friend's gone, he's sitting there on his phone texting or whatever, and you just see, and there's just rocks everywhere around him. She's been throwing hundreds of them trying to get his attention. And then he finally gets up, and as soon as he addresses her, then she approaches him.
But she's been getting closer and closer and closer this entire time, just inching ever so closer. And it's almost as if that is actually a really key moment, right? Because like you said, he initiates, and that's what she needs. It's almost like the invitation of the ghost into the household, you know what I mean? Like
the
same with the
into the house.
Vampire, you get that with black-eyed kids. Right. You get that with a lot of things.
Totally.
So that's interesting. You need that invitation. And then he makes the connection later on that he had actually seen her before, right? At different locations prior to crimes, and that, like, you know, like you get the cloth, like, that she's wearing in the very end scene where she grabs his hand and she's all ghostly white and spectral looking.
Right.
And then he puts it together. He's like, no, you're responsible for all of this. Like, and because she's been there all along, just in different forms and just watching over.
Yeah.
So that's another thing too, because we get this theme of, like, it's a terrible thing for you to see the devil. It's even worse for the devil to see you, right? As soon as he takes notice and as soon as he starts taking pictures, like, that's another element to this movie that's kind of effed up and unique, right, to a certain extent. Definitely. I love the end scene where we get that in two forms, the photographs, but we'll get to that in a second.
Yeah. So let's come back to the part where Zhongzhu and his partner, I'm forgetting the name, and his partner's nephew, who is a deacon in training to be a priest.
Right.
So this is this other little dash of Catholicism that they chuck in there, but it's completely useless.
Yeah, he's so young, hey, naive. And,
yeah, and they go to what they call, like, the Japanese man's house, like out in the valley. It's out in the woods, right? And this is where we get this first look at the photographs. So the friend cop basically, like, whatever, busts down kind of a secret door type thing, and there's, like, this ritual. There's, like, a goat skull. It's clearly like for demonic ritual sacrifice. There's, like, crows hanging from the ceiling and stuff like that.
Candles lit all
and
over.
There's pictures, photos from all of the crime scenes.
Oh, and then objects from the
objects. So that's, I mean...
What do you make of the reaction of the cop, like the partner cop, when he sees that? And there's this super extended scene of him literally just staring at everything.
I mean, and we're just, totally, like, and you and I are looking at each other being like, you'd think you'd be like, grab a couple things. And that's the other thing, too, about this. It's like, these guys are cops, but it's like, they don't act like cops at all. You know what I mean? And it's like, the guy shows up again. They still don't know if he's a ghost or not. And instead of arresting him, they're kind of just like, all like freaked out because like they had broken into his house. It's like, guys, like, you're police officers.
Yeah,
have some authority here. Like,
take charge.
Yeah, like, do whatever you got to do.
Where's your gats? And the other weird thing about that, how he had this extended scene where he's just staring away, is the fact that right behind him, there's a rabid dog that's attacking his cousin and his partner. And he's just like in such shock. And then after, right, that's when he is sucked in, I think, his partner, right? Because he is almost in a trance when they leave.
Right.
And they have this weird moment, super awkward, with the Japanese man when he shows up. And the Japanese man basically just stares them down. There's, like, no communication. And they're just, like, hanging their heads as if they're, like, little boys that are, like, ashamed of what they've done.
Almost.
When what they should be doing is demanding an explanation.
Right.
And then you don't get that until the second visit from Jong-jun. And when he goes there without his partner. Or is that the third visit? He goes there a few times.
I think he goes back a third time.
Actually, no, that was the second visit, because that's when he destroys the shrine, kills the dog, and then that's when he really upsets the Japanese man.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, who we're starting to slowly figure out is not a man, obviously.
Right.
He's something somewhere in between. And this is the coolest thing about, like, Japanese ghosts, clearly, like, clearly this crosses over into South Korean folklore as well, is this idea of ghosts being much more physical than us, our belief of them in North America, you know what I mean? Like, they are very much flesh and blood. What's the word? Is it yukai? Is that the name? Astonishing Legends covered Japanese ghosts recently.
Oh,
I can't remember what they're called
I think
exactly.
that's what it's called.
And they talked about that, like how, it's very much, they're spectral, but they're also they can be very literal.
Very
like,
literal,
right
very physical. We saw quite a few examples of that in cinema, at least during our Japanese studies course, that film course.
Yeah, definitely.
That was super interesting. And that was a little bit more of a traditional take on Japanese film. Like, those films came from, like, the 70s, 80s, 50s.
You have to imagine that all those films influenced this South Korean film industry, though, for sure.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. This is like a new age version of that, is kind of what I feel.
Definitely.
Because you get that, where it's a very physical ghost that operates in the material world, has material desires, too, seemingly, and also material necessities, right? And sustenance, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you get, obviously, you see his meal when they walk into his hut. You see the meal. There's like chicken feet and in a bowl with some sauce and like broth or something like that. So clearly he is of a physical nature, a material form. But I think that's where we get another sort of crossover between the quote at the beginning, right? Because there's this idea that perhaps this guy is indeed a reincarnation of sorts, or some sort of resurrection, but not of the good kind.
No, of some evil.
Exactly. And there is definitely no Jesus present in this realm, that's for sure.
No.
It's clearly the exact opposite. And so I thought that was interesting. It's almost as if, because at the very end scene, when he tempts the priest or deacon in training to come over and touch him, he's doing the exact same thing that Jesus was doing to his disciples, right? Reach over and touch me. I'm of flesh and bone.
Yeah.
Spirits don't have, like, flesh and bone. Ghosts don't have that. So I thought that was an interesting point.
And I'm just sitting there like, slice his head off, dude. Like, you brought the sickle with you. Like, you're so useless.
Yeah.
Anyway.
He's even got a rosary, too.
It's just so... hopeless. Just hopeless. Which
very,
is
very
which
hopeless.
Is, anyway, pun intended, I guess. Hope. Okay.
Anyway,
but this is where, so like after that second visit where he kills the dog and all that kind of stuff, things start to go real bad. Because his daughter's already started to be affected by this, and the rash is showing up on her.
And her personality changes.
Her personality totally
instantly.
changes. I think they notice at first because she starts eating fish, and she hates fish.
Right after the the night where she had those nightmares where she relates to her dad, Jong-jun.
Right.
That she is having this man knock on the door repeatedly. And you don't even really know if she physically means a door or if it's the door of her mind.
Right.
Right? That's kind of what I thought. because like it's coming to her in her dreams.
Or if he's physically there, or if it's some sort of like, to reference Sabrina from on Netflix, like spectral projection. You know what I mean? Like
astral projection.
Astral projection, yeah. Or some sort of weird whatever.
Because
right?
he gets
he's
photographs
in your head,
of her.
But he's not exactly.
In
he's
the room.
not there snapping pictures though.
Seemingly.
Yet Zhongzhu did see him at that second crime scene, just kind of standing in the background there with his little fishing hat on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not very nice.
Yeah, totally. So that's messed up, hey? So the next morning, so she wakes up and she's completely different.
Yeah.
And then the grandmother makes a comment that she's going to call a shaman.
Right.
Yeah, a shaman over here.
Yes.
Anyway.
Not a priest.
No.
A shaman.
A shaman, exactly.
So that's interesting.
Which is interesting because we already had the reference to the shaman from the second crime scene with the burned down house.
Yes. The foreshadowing there, perhaps. But yeah, I think that's interesting. So they give us the line from the Bible at the beginning, yet it's really just the words that matter, not the fact that it's from the Bible.
Exactly.
Right? Mm-hmm. Then there's multiple religions being incorporated here, because shamanism is essentially a religion. It exists in different forms around the world and is practiced slightly different ways. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we get this shaman that comes in and they pay him, what, 10 grand or something to try to
do the death hex.
The death hex.
Yeah.
I found it to be so, like, hey, I took some Siberian studies courses in university and stuff like that, and heavily focused on like indigenous folklore and shamanism and stuff like that. And the way he was like dancing around and like the music and the costume and stuff like that was like so similar to like the Yakugirs or like Siberian people's shamans, which I found really interesting. I guess
or even
there's
Celtic forms of shamanism.
Absolutely, yeah. Like, well, I found it to be like not that I've seen South Korean shamanism, but it was almost like it seemed out of place culturally or something. Mm-hmm. But it's like, what do I know?
But maybe it's not. Like, that's just it. Maybe there are a lot more similarities to these types of ritual practices and this sort of sorcery and things. And not to say that it's universal by any means, because it's definitely not.
I suppose black
and the different implications behind it all are probably
right.
different. But actually, we kind of got that a little bit mixed up here.
Okay.
So it didn't actually happen that he goes and destroys the shrine and the dog of the Japanese man. And that's when the daughter starts acting crazy. She actually starts acting crazy before that.
Then he goes because he's mad.
Exactly, right. So he knows there's some kind of witchcraft going on, and he knows that he needs to go back to the house of the Japanese man. So then that's when he goes, and that's when they find the shrine with the million photos. And exactly that. So then that's when, before he goes to destroy the shrine, he actually finds that book that's super disturbing, all the drawings that his daughter's been doing. And he knows that he sees the rash appearing on her like groin area,
right,
her upper leg there,
yeah,
and that's when she wakes up and begins swearing and yelling hysterically at him, and says she threatens at that moment that she's going to kill them all.
Yeah.
So that to me is the point where you're like, okay. So then that's when he goes back to the shrine, interrogates the Japanese man, and destroys his thing, and then the next day is where we get the goat hanging outside.
Yeah.
I was kind of confused, but I was like, wait a second. Let's review that. Because, like, the goat outside the gate, that's a huge sign there, right? Like, that's like a Black Phillip all over again.
Yeah, that ain't no pinata. That's not a good sign.
And then he awakens, like, paralyzed. Remember,
yeah.
he can't even move. He can't walk. All of his hands and legs are all, like, gnarled up.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, and again, we're further along here, but we still don't know what this guy is, and we still don't know at this point if this girl, what this girl is.
Totally.
But so it's like, so the question is, it's like, are we dealing with a human being practicing witchcraft, and then there's a ghost on the side? Mm-hmm. Is there essentially voodoo and witchcraft can be considered to be similar depending on what you're looking at, but is there, like, because of the aspect of the mushrooms and people going insane and having physical rashes and stuff like that, sounds like a tonic, like a voodoo.
It kind of does,
right?
Or is that some sort of hex too?
Well, it was same idea, right? Yeah, hexing and voodoo. So there's that, or is it like that? This guy is like, a devil, a demon.
The Japanese man? That's exactly it. And I don't think we get the answer until, like, the very last scene.
Right.
But it's so interesting because we do, like, before all of that happens, there's a lot to this movie, right? Like, there's a lot of, like, ebbs and flows in the pace, which is nice. It's not really, it doesn't conform to Western expectations of, like, the plot arc, I don't think, as much. But there's a lot of really, like, high action moments and then a lot of, like, descending action moments, right? Of like calm and then it ramps back up again.
Yeah.
And that's when we get this, right? So we get a lot of action with the scene where he destroys and has this moment, right? It's like, it is a moment of catharsis for him when he wrecks the dog, like just butchers it, which is really sad. I didn't really like that scene. And then the dog, well, the dog's just a dog,
but
man.
But it's like that is obviously.
Is it a
like,
hellhound? I don't think so.
Yes, absolutely.
I don't think so. I think he was just
guarding it's literally. It was meant to be a hellhound. That's why they...
I'm a sucker for those types of dogs, though.
Well,
I
am
them.
too.
But anyway, so yeah, we get that moment, and then we get the shaman that performs a ritual afterwards, and it's not super violent, but it seems to be pretty effective on the girl, right, where they're outside. He's got the swords clashing. It's not the big one where he does, like, the death hex yet.
Right.
But he's trying to just eliminate the spirit from her. I don't think it... And that's in response to her stabbing the babysitter, right? Because they leave her alone for a couple hours while he's getting his acupuncture so he can walk again. And then they come home to this, like, massacre scene.
Yeah.
Where she doesn't kill the babysitter.
I don't think she's dead, but she's, like, bleeding out on the floor or whatever.
Exactly. So then we get this whole death hex ceremony planned. And then the shaman makes this reference to going fishing. And he says to Jeongju, and he says, you never know what you might catch. Because that's like kind of Jeongju's like asking him why? Why us? Like, why my daughter? She hasn't committed any sin. Mm-hmm. And then it turns out it's his sin that apparently she's paying for. I don't even know.
Well, that's just what's told to him later on.
Well, exactly. But... And that's just one sort of religious lens to understand that.
Right.
Like, I don't I don't think he was singled out for any sin in particular.
No. That's just what was told to him. Because they were like, oh, you sinned for, like, disturbing another or accusing another. Mm-hmm. And it's like, that was, again, this is before we know what the Japanese man is. But it's like, and then I was saying to you, I was like, how was that sin? Like, he showed up and was, like, demanding answers, and the guy just stared at him, and he's got a freaking room full of weird ritual, demonic stuff and pictures of the crime scenes and items of dead people. Clearly, this guy is not okay. Yeah. And that's a perfectly rational thing to think. That's not a sin, right? Like, how is that, like, that's that guy's fault, even if he's not a demonic entity, right? Yeah, he's just like totally a mute. True. Write it down, bro.
I don't know. Something. And so he leaves with no answers, and we get all this stuff going on. And then at one point, I'm not sure if this is before or after the death hex scene, when they go back to the village, or sorry, they go back to his house again. And his friend gets electrocuted by lightning.
No. Okay, so I wouldn't call that person a friend necessarily. That was a person from the village that had also, that was the hunter that had seen the naked guy in a diaper eating a deer in the middle of the woods, right? Right. And so they go to talk to him, and he leads them back to this spot. This was before Jeongju had his experience with seeing it.
Oh, that's true. That's the very first time. Yeah.
So they go out into the woods. They see all these carcasses everywhere, and they're like, "Oh, wow, you're clearly not making this shit up." And then black comedy strikes, pun intended again, because literally they're like, "We shouldn't be here," and then it's like the classic, like immediately the thunder lightning starts, and then the guy gets struck by lightning.
They use that a lot in this film for comedic purposes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, to kind of heighten that dramatic moment. Mm-hmm. That was a very. And then they get the scene in the hospital. He's like, "Oh, what's the point of drinking so many tonics if it's lightning that kills you?"
And you can't help but laugh, right? You're like, "What are the odds?" And it's like, no kidding. What are the odds?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Okay, can we skip forward a little bit to that scene where after the death hex and the Japanese man has been weakened to the point where he's almost killed, but not because stupid Jeongju, stops the ceremony when he shouldn't have. I don't think he should have. I think he should have completed it, personally.
I guess. I mean, yeah, I agree, I suppose. Yeah.
Okay, so you get that, and then essentially the old Japanese man wakes up the next morning and is, like, in dire straits, right? Like, he's not doing good. Like, he obviously had some crazy, like, fever going on. Like, he's underneath a bunch of furs, like, shivering. He looks like he's dead. And then he kind of goes off into the woods, and he tries... I don't even know what he's trying to do, but then he sees the woman, right? The girl ghost, Mumyeong, and then chases her for a little distance. And then you get the arrival of the cops on his premises again while he's gone. Yeah. And then that's when a chase scene ensues between all of them, because they're just like, "Screw this man, we're gonna kill you, motherfucker." And because they're basically testing the theory. If he's a ghost, they won't be able to kill him.
Right.
If he is a man, then they will be able to. So they bring
So this is after Zhongzhu has snapped, right? He gathers up all his buddies.
Exactly, because by now his daughter's in dire straits. She's in the hospital. She's dying, and so they bring a watering can.
And so they're chucking all their supplies in the back of the truck, and like the guys, there's like a watering can, a rake, like a regular leaf rake, like not even like a hardcore rake. Like, what are you gonna do? Clean his yard?
I know, right? Oh my
pretty
gosh.
funny.
And then you get that hilarious scene, right, with the zombie, like, I don't even know who they are.
That's just it. This is the aspect. There's like a million angles of a cult in this movie. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they run into that figure who's like this possessed zombie thing that the Japanese man had clearly been using for part of his counter hex, basically. I guess. Because the scene before that, the shaman's going crazy doing his ritual. Mm-hmm. Zhongzhu's daughter is like freaking out, being like, please stop, please stop. Mm-hmm. He's, like you just said, he stops it prematurely. Yeah. And the entire time, there's this back and forth competition at a distance between these black magics, basically.
Right.
So we've got the shaman nailing these big iron stakes into very voodoo-esque. Right. Yeah. I mean, that's like the
bodily representation there.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And hammering the stakes into it, and he's being affected by it
everywhere. Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, and you can't see the blood on him, but he's like, oh. Then they don't finish it off.
So annoying.
Frustrating.
So annoying. And so basically he had his own thing going on where he's sacrificing crows, and he's got a picture of the daughter that he's doing some crazy hex on or something. But then it goes like terribly wrong for him. And then, so you get this scene, another bumbling fool scene with all of the group of cops plus extras that just can't handle one freaking zombie dude that's unarmed.
Pretty pathetic.
It's so sad.
But really funny though.
But then the only thing that stops him is his own death. He ends up just croaking him.
And I've already figured out that the reason the movie's called The Wailing is because everyone is literally wailing the entire movie. It's just everyone's literally especially the main character, he is constantly just screaming the entire movie.
Oh, for sure. I think it actually translated more so as what was it? It wasn't quite The Wailing, but it's close enough.
That's my just funny interpretation.
Oh, totally. But you're right. It essentially was that that no one can take him on. As soon as someone starts to fight this zombie thing, the others step in and are like, oh no, he's not himself. He's sick. Yeah. And then they start attacking the guy that's defending him. Yeah. And then it's just this whole hilarious domino thing.
Man, I want to be a zombie in South Korea, not in Atlanta in The Walking Dead. Jeez,
your head just sniped off.
Yeah. Seriously though, actually, they're really nice down there, I guess.
They really are. You don't see a single gun the entire movie.
No, it's kind of refreshing.
It is, I guess. It adds
but I would have.
It adds a layer of surrealism, I think, because I don't know if that's really the case in South Korea. I think they have guns.
Well, definitely less than
North Korea.
Us. No. North Koreans don't have any guns.
I know,
just
right?
the army. That just reminded me of a Murray quote where you're like, "What about the gun?" Yeah, but the New Zealand Army's got that. Just the one gun.
Oh my gosh. Right. Okay, but getting back to this whole scene where they pursue him through the woods, and he's very fast for being so frail and old, which is kind of funny. He seems to outrun all of them. And they're all just, the entire time, again, it's like a Charlie Chaplin film, right? Where they're all tumbling over themselves through the hills of the woods.
Terrain,
Exactly. And it's so funny. They're all dirty and everything. Yeah. And they get to this big cliff face, and he's gone. They're like, God damn it. But essentially what he's done is he's just hanging from the cliff. And then he drops down, and you get this really weird moment. And you see a very vulnerable side of the Japanese man. And he starts weeping. Yeah. Yeah. What'd you make of that?
At that point, I was kind of questioning whether or not this was a real man possessed. Because why would a demon be crying? Or why would anything that's not a man be injured in a human form?
That's a really, Well, that's a good question too. And what if he is a man, a spirit of a man that has been then possessed by a devil of sorts? So he is just he is a puppet himself, kind of just doing the bidding.
Right.
I like that.
That definitely was a weird scene though, right? And then of course he looks over, sees the ghost.
Boom. Ghost girl.
And
chases her.
These guys, of course, the whole crew up above on the cliff is all disappointed that they didn't catch him.
John June, when he starts crying,
oh yeah,
I have to catch him. He's just like getting.
Yeah, that's
hilarious.
Yeah, it was a little bit overkill, perhaps. And then they're driving home, and like all of a sudden, just the body of the Japanese man smashes into the windshield of the car.
Exact, and it's all the dooming of the girl ghost.
Right, and they're just thinking to themselves like, "That's weird."
And that's a convenient ending to our problems.
Convenient ending, and they think he's dead.
Yeah.
Right. They toss him over. They're looking both ways, being like, "Yep, we're not calling the police. I am the police, technically, even though you don't act like it." And,
exactly. Yeah.
And yeah, they kind of launch him down a bank. Yeah.
So then you think everything's A-okay. Everything's back to being kosher. And he goes to the hospital. He opens the door. His face is all bloody as hell. And then he sees his daughter and repeatedly asks her, like, "Are you okay now? Are you okay?
Like,
are you?" Yeah, exactly.
You're made to think that that's the end.
Yep.
Of the movie, right? You're thinking credits are coming. They do that pan back where it's like that slow fade out of the hospital door as the family's all like hugging each other. That's like the quintessential end to a movie.
It is.
You know what I mean? And then nope, there's still 40 minutes left of crazy shit.
Of craziness, yeah. So where do we go from here? It's like
I feel like honestly we should. We're coming in towards the ending, but I'm most interested in your take on the reintroduction of the shaman after this point. He thinks everything's cool, then all of a sudden, a few days later, basically.
Yeah, oh my gosh. He kind of comes to the realization that he's made a terrible mistake and he read the divination, like the prophecy, wrong.
Right.
And he says essentially the one that he'd cast the death hex on wasn't the proper ghost. It was actually another shaman that was trying to get rid of the actual evil ghost. So then you get this other sort of conflation, right, of spirits, where it's like, okay, so wait a second, actually the Japanese man is a man. So now we're on his side. And we're thinking like, okay, man, like let's make a recovery here. Let's,
yeah.
You know what I mean? And then you're completely on guard when you see the girl ghost again, because she essentially comes out of the gate of Jeonju's house when the shaman arrives,
right,
and casts some sort of crazy spell on him to make him vomit blood.
That's like my favorite. That's one of my favorite scenes in the movie. So yeah, that to me is the most hardcore scene. Like super cool. And just the idea of being able, to obviously bodily fluids. There's a lot of demonic stuff has to do with that too, but just like ghosts. So yeah, he crosses the threshold. There's always a threshold.
Totally.
Right? He crosses literally through the arch, the portal, like literally by definition. No, he does, and that's why it happens. He's like one step over, and then she walks out of the shadows and is like, "What do you do?" Well, at first he's just like drip, drip, couple drops of blood. He's like, "What the heck?" Yeah. Takes a few more steps and then starts gushing blood out of his nose.
And then he kind of falls back into the street.
And then starts vomiting, like basically just like foam and like white. Oh,
so I think that's kind of when you get to see her true nature. Even though by the end of it, I'm still confused.
By the end of it, you don't know if they're both competing evil entities, which I'm kind of the mind. Yeah. That they're both, she's a ghost and he's a demon.
Yeah.
And there's multiple levels of physicalness here.
Actually, that's very true.
You know what I
They're
mean?
both sort of physical, though, because she ends up grabbing Jeonju's hand at the very end.
Did you notice what it looked like?
It was effing creepy, man.
It's like all gnarled and like gray and like cold.
Very
and
spectral looking, right? It was not freaky. Alive.
Not alive.
And so that's when he makes the realization that she has been present this entire time as well, watching.
Right.
So is she the devil that has sort of caught, like he's caught her attention, so to speak? Yeah. Like, how did that even happen, right? We never really know.
It's just this.
I feel like we need to go back and watch this movie again.
I think we definitely should, and then we can kind of continue the conversation in the forum on Facebook, and you guys listening can come jump in, because we're really curious what you guys have to think about this.
And especially, I am super curious about this very last scene, right? Okay. So we get this sort of build up, this climax building here, where Jeonju sees the girl ghost again. Mu Mion, sorry, and has this exchange with her where she's trying to convince him that it's still the Japanese man, and she goes off with her same story as if it's a script, right? Where she's saying, he'll suck your blood, and blah, blah, blah. It's the exact same thing she told him before, and he says, like, shut up, bitch, like, I know you're lying.
Yeah.
and then
Broken record.
Yeah, exactly. But she's trying to keep him away from his house. And so while she keeps him there, you get the return of his daughter to their house. She is the demon at that point.
Right.
Ends up committing a bunch of like devastating murders and whatever else, and then that's when he comes back. Yeah,
stabs the mom and grandmother with a knife.
Exactly. He enters, finds the massacre, and then you don't really know what happens. You see her in the doorway, and then he's calling out to her and gesturing to her to come to him.
Yeah.
And then that's all you see.
Yeah.
And then there's this end scene with the shaman that really just...
bizarre.
But there's two things going on too, right? Because you get the devil in the cave with the deacon guy.
Yeah.
And then you get this scene unfolding too, where there's pictures being taken on both ends.
Right.
So...
it ends with photographs. Mm-hmm. So you've got the deacon, he's found this... That was confusing to me too. I didn't know where exactly he had went. He
saw a light in the woods.
Okay.
He saw a far off distant red light, and I don't know what he had in mind.
Like he wanted to go kill this thing. He wanted to know what it was. He grabbed a scythe and his cross.
His rosary.
And was like, yeah, and presumably that's what he was going to do.
So he went to this cave and uncovers the devil, essentially, where we see the true form of this guy.
Yeah.
And that's where we get to the end of that sort of analogy with the beginning quote, right? With the touch my flesh, I have bones.
And he starts growing these long nails, and his hands become hairy, and literally starts growing devil horns out of his head, and starts like looking like he's not a man, obviously. Mm-hmm. So
see my true form is kind of the whole, yeah.
But what I mean, I don't understand the whole presence of Catholicism is weird to me. It shouldn't be weird because this is a movie that clearly has demonic connotations to it. Mm-hmm. But it's also, they focus on the shamanism as a way of bringing it out as if it has nothing to do with heaven and hell or demons and non-demons. So it's like, is this thing just a monster?
That's totally true.
And the sort of juxtaposition to Catholicism is really just to confuse us.
It is. And it is to sort of highlight the idea that there is no savior present.
Right.
There is no one.
Oh, great. Good times, guys.
Yeah. It's dark.
Doomed.
It's dark.
We need Werner Herzog, your impending doom.
So we get this devil dude taking pictures of the deacon priest guy, and he's just standing there as if he's like hypnotized.
Right.
And that's the end of him, I guess. He never leaves the cave, I guess. I don't know. But then what I really want everyone's take on is the very last scene with the shaman where he enters the building, the home of Jeonju, and takes the photos. He takes a photo of each of the dead victims, leaves the girl who's sitting on the front porch, and gets in his car that's all packed up. He's got his entire shaman office in there. And you see this moment where he drops a box, and there's a million photos that fall out. And they're all like the Instax, like instant ones.
Yeah.
And you're like, hey, wait a second. Are all of those photos the ones that we saw in the shrine in the house of the Japanese man? Because that's a lot of photos, man. That's a lot.
Yeah, and so you're right at the end. You're chucked a monkey wrench.
Yeah.
Was this guy in on all of this the whole time? Yeah. Which just seems super unlikely because they like sought him out. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And like you made the comment like,
and he was attacked too.
Yeah, he was. And like we were trying to rationalize it, being like, well, why? Like, what would be the connection here? And then we were kind of joking to be like, yeah, like maybe it was like almost like literally like a Scooby-Doo-esque plot where it's like you got to partner up with a devil so you can keep your business up and running. You know what I mean?
Well, he did charge $10,000.
Well, yeah, I suppose that's fairly lucrative, especially if you can partner up with a devil.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like that's very Scooby-Doo-esque.
Yeah, it was.
Like, I don't know.
Very sophisticated.
But at the same time, you are made to question his.
Or is he simply packing up, leaving town because he knows that this town is doomed and he's going to continue his own investigation? Maybe his investigation has been a lot more extensive than we're led to believe in the very beginning. And maybe that's why he is sought out, because he is kind of the leading expert in this.
Like, other than that scene, you're not really given anything else to make it seem as if he's bad. Like, he's an evil person, or he's involved in a negative way somehow. He definitely just seems like a shaman that
He
was
does,
hired.
yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I'm really curious about all of your guys' opinion.
Exactly. I kind of like how he is ambiguous like that, hey?
Yeah, yeah.
Because you're not really sure. You don't get that strict binary of good and evil, which is maybe what they're trying to explore, the ambiguity of evil in all of its different forms.
Right.
And how maybe there isn't always the counterpart, the good. You know what I mean?
Well, clearly. Yeah, this is just bad on bad on bad. Evil on evil on evil. Damn. I gotta chuck out a couple of things here that were kind of I just noticed them and they were really funny and interesting and awesome.
Let's do it.
Some of the black comedy points. I already mentioned one where they're like in the woods, and as soon as they mention like we shouldn't be here, and instantly the thunder and lightning starts. It's like just so perfect, right? Also the scene at the second massacre when he shows up and gets attacked by the woman, and then a few minutes later he's back at the police station just kind of sitting there like this, and his daughter, before she's having troubles, comes through the door, and the quote is, it's just quiet for a second, then the quote is just, Mom wanted me to give you clean boxer shorts and a shirt. like, because he clearly crapped his pants when he was getting attacked.
You should have a shower.
Yeah, exactly, right? And then the scene when him and his police officer partner are in the station at night, and there's that naked woman that ends up burning the house down at the door, and they like just start freaking out, like flopping around, flailing around, like
Thunder and lightning
this
going.
is a police station, for God's sakes. Like, how are you guys that afraid of like somebody at the door?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh man, it's just
so
priceless.
good. The power goes out, and that's that.
Yeah. Oh, it's just...
There were so many good moments. And again, I already mentioned the scene where they were chasing the Japanese man. They get to the point of the cliff where he's just disappeared, but he's right there before him, and it's so frustrating. And then he has his breakdown where he's just like, he's just a bumbling buffoon baby.
Yeah,
where he's just
but
like
I love
weeping.
him though. You're rooting
so
for him.
good.
He's so likable, and like
He
you
is.
just like. And I don't know if you noticed this too. It wasn't so much in the second half, but he in almost every scene for the first half of the movie, he's eating. Like every scene, they'll go to him and
So
he's
he's
eating
in-
something, and he's eating this, eating that. It was very much like Brad Pitt in Ocean's 11, where it's like every scene he's eating something.
What is that a metaphor? Like gluttony? Is he like, you know what I mean? Like, is that perhaps his sin? Because then you do get the
come
scene
on.
at the very beginning ish, right, where he
Gluttony.
is where
Give me a break.
it's him and his wife, right, having sex in the car.
Yes.
Why are they having sex in the car?
Well, because I don't know, there was no privacy in the house. I guess.
I almost thought it was like a neighbor girl for the longest time.
No,
and like,
yeah, no. I thought that for a split second too. But then he gets him, he's like, I'm getting too old for this shit. And it's clearly his wife.
Yeah.
He's like, you need to give me some herbal remedies. Like, I can't keep this up. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, definitely some really funny lines. And I think what's the most interesting about this is it's a thriller horror movie, but without anything that jumps out at you. There's no like pop out and scream in your face, like jump out of your seat. It's just this very you're super engaged the whole time.
Yeah.
You're not like shirt over your eyes, like afraid of what's going to jump out.
Exactly. No cheap thrills.
No cheap thrills.
The only thing that I could say was like really sudden is when the Japanese man hits the car, like the windshield. But that's already a crazy scene happening already, where they're spinning all over the like, you know, the road, and and then then that happens. But it's not like a monster
like a
jump out at you
monster.
moment kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Like we got a lot of in the ruins.
Do my Bob. So ultimately, final thoughts, and would you recommend this movie?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I would highly recommend this movie if you have a good chunk of time to devote to it, because I wouldn't want to watch it in like 2 chunks kind of thing.
No, you got to watch it in one sitting.
Exactly.
Sure.
And you do have to be paying attention. You can't just be watching this and doing homework.
No, you can't. But don't be disturbed, like put off by subtitles. It's definitely easy to follow.
Yeah.
And just I would as well. I would recommend it as well. Awesome movie.
It's a gem of a film.
Yeah,
it really
awesome
is.
movie.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're sorry it took us so long. Yeah,
It was just an extra week.
it
Not so bad.
1 week. Better late than never.
So, as usual, guys, hit us up. Let us know what you think. You can always send us emails into the portal mailbox at gmail.com, or come hit us up on the socials. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Into the Portal Podcast on Instagram. I think it's the same on Facebook, and join our group. Come join the forum, and we can chat about this movie and other weird stuff.
Yeah, we're going to post an official thread so you guys can have a space to discuss.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else?
I think that's it.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks again for listening, you guys, and until Sunday.
was a podcast from the Podfix Network. You can check out more shows like it at podfixnetwork.com.